British troops were boarded on ships at Boston and sent back to England. When this news reached Europe, it encouraged further support of the revolution. In a letter to his brother, John Augustine Washington, General George Washington wrote of this victory, saying, "I most devoutly congratulate my country and every well-wisher to the cause on this signal stroke of Providence."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at VCYAmerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And we thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on VCY America. Just before we introduce our guest and topic today, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps you've heard the breaking news from Israel. Israel National News reporting that the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, was eliminated yesterday after a tank fired at a building in Rafah, which was thought to contain terrorists. Well, the infantry from the 450th Battalion searched the building, and his body was found. Didn't even know he was amongst those terrorists there. And the bodies of the terrorists, they found cash, they found false ID cards. The Jerusalem Post also reported, and they went through testing and so forth, orthodontic experts who examined the jaw and teeth of the found corpse revealed a unique and matching dental structure to that of Sinwar. We understand a DNA test also were conducted. This is a major, major development in the war against Hamas. The Hamas leader now eliminated. The Hezbollah leader has already been eliminated, Nasrallah, and yet anticipated yet for a major attack upon Iran to take place. So we continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and certainly this is a major development in this war on terror. Well, friends, we now turn our attention to the November 5th election, which is really already underway. Absentee ballots are out. Many are being returned. The majority of states have already begun early voting, others yet to come. And, of course, the election day itself. And for quite some time, there has been deep concerns regarding election integrity. Recently, a PBS News and Marist poll reported a full 58% of Americans are concerned that voter fraud will occur in the upcoming presidential election. And while some states have shored up their election process, others have been running quite a loose-knit operation. And activist judges also have been declaring void the actions of some states to bring about election integrity. I mean, we have talked for years about all the illegal immigrants entering our nation, and now the Biden-Harris administration has taken to court 2 states to prevent them from removing non-citizens from the voter rolls. Well, discussing the matter of election integrity, we have a gentleman with us today who has researched, studied, and written about this over the course of many, many years. Joining us, Robert Knight. He's a former Los Angeles Times news editor and columnist for the Washington Times, as well as to other publications. Robert has had senior positions in a number of pro-family organizations. He's written several books, including The Coming Communist Wave, What Happens If the Left Captures All 3 Branches of Government, Liberty on the Brink, and Crooked, What Really Happened in the 2020 Election and How to Stop the Fraud. Bob, welcome back here to Crosstalk.
Always good to be on with you, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Bob, you wrote a column just a few weeks back indicating that this is more than just a consequential election, and you wrote this: vote as if your liberty depends on it, because it does. Is it really that critical?
Well, I believe it is. And if you look over Kamala Harris's record, she has what I call totalitarian tendencies. As Attorney General in California, she went after the Little Sisters of the Poor because they didn't want to provide abortifacients to employees on religious grounds, and she wanted to force them to do it. She initiated the investigation of the 2 undercover pro-lifers who exposed Planned Parenthood executives talking about the sale of body parts from aborted babies. She initiated that investigation. She didn't charge them because she left to run for the Senate, and then her successor went ahead and charged them. And if you look over how she treated like a Catholic nominee to the one of the federal courts, she went after him for being a member of the Knights of Columbus. To her, that was a disqualifying thing. Think of that kind of religious bigotry being ensconced in the White House. Well, actually, it is. I mean, the Biden-Harris administration has shown enormous hostility toward many Christians, and particularly conservative Christians. And people ought to realize that the power of the federal government has grown enormously in recent years, so that federal agencies are becoming a law unto themselves. And in the wrong hands, that can be very frightening. So I do think this is a huge election, and that states like Wisconsin are going to play a huge role in what kind of country we have after November 5th.
Yeah. Matter of fact, a number of swing states with us today on the program. Pennsylvania listeners today, Michigan listeners with us, and others as well. And Bob, we're going to get into some specifics in just a bit, but let me ask you this personally. Do you have present concerns over the matter of election integrity in this 2024 election?
Oh, very much so, because, well, look at it this way, Jim. 27 states since 2020 have moved to strengthen their election integrity. But these are mostly Republican states, if not all. And they've tightened voting requirements. They do require voter ID. They don't allow unmanned ballot boxes. They don't allow ballot harvesting. You know, all of these innovations are serve to make it easier to cheat. There's no other good reason to have them. You know, the Democrats in many of the states that have adopted these innovations say that, oh, well, you know, it's because the current system suppresses the vote of minorities and elderly and young people, so we have to make it so wide open anybody can vote. But no, it's not that hard to vote, and it sure isn't hard to show a voter ID. This is, you know, a racist premise that somehow minorities cannot show a valid ID. Like they're children. They don't function in society like adults. I guess they don't go to the banks. They don't go to pharmacies. They never board an aircraft or go into a government building. There are literally dozens of places you need to show an ID, and virtually everybody has them. So to say that, oh, we got to get rid of voter ID because it'll disenfranchise minorities is profoundly racist, I think.
And Bob, at the same time, I mean, look at the number of federal buildings that require the showing of an ID to enter them, a photo ID. If we go to our local library, you want to get Curious George and the Man with the Yellow Hat, you got to show your ID, your photo ID, in order to do that, or to get a library card. We've got, you know, these recycling places to take our used motor oil or brush from our yards. Guess what? We've got to show a photo ID in order to enter those things in there, and to say that, you know, people of different status, skin color, whatever, you know, are somehow disenfranchised. They don't throw that same thing up when somebody's wanting to get rid of brush from their yard.
No, it's absurd. And, you know, if you look at the surveys over the last few years, everybody supports voter ID, including every ethnic group, including Democrats by a majority. They're not as supportive as Republicans are, but still a majority of Democrats surveyed in major polls say they support voter ID as a common sense voter integrity measure.
Let's talk about some of the actions that are going on right now, and I'm just baffled, as many are, regarding what is happening in the Biden-Harris administration, Bob, who are actually fighting states and taking legal action against them simply for their attempts to remove illegal aliens from the voter rolls. I mean, the Washington Stand reports that right now we have the Biden-Harris administration has hauled 2 Republican states into court to prevent them from removing non-citizens from the voter rolls. Biden-Harris DOJ is suing Virginia over an order to purge non-citizens from the ballot. Virginia Governor Youngkin issued an executive order calling for the state to assure every registered voter is a legal U.S. citizen. They have filed a similar lawsuit against Alabama. Bob, have we lost our minds?
Well, here's what they say in that law, which was passed during the Clinton administration. It's the motor voter law, which made it easier to vote and had people sign up at various agencies. But it also requires all states to keep accurate voter rolls. So this is a matter of selective enforcement. Okay, they say that there's a quiet period of 90 days before an election in which you cannot do a mass removal of people from voter rolls. And that's what the Justice Department is saying, that, hey, Governor Youngkin in Virginia, you're violating the law, and you in Alabama are violating the law. But the funny thing is they never enforce the rest of the law,
right.
The whole spirit of the law, which is to keep the voter rolls
right.
clean. It's like when they go after people in various places for enforcing immigration law, but they give a pass to sanctuary cities where they're flouting federal immigration law.
Yeah.
That's what we have, two systems of justice here.
We also have an activist judge in Georgia. This is Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney of Fulton County. And he ruled that no election superintendent or member of the Board of Elections and Registration may refuse to certify or abstain from certifying election results under any circumstance. Even if they know fraud is going on, the judges order them, you must certify it.
Yeah, I don't know how he justifies that. It's got to be a weird reading of the law to say, well, the law requires reporting those results regardless of whether they're valid or not. I don't know how a judge who takes an oath to uphold the law could come up with this ruling, but hey, we've seen even weirder rulings out there.
Yeah. We were just talking about the non-citizens voting, and Florida has just launched a lawsuit against the Biden-Harris administration. Florida is claiming that Biden-Harris administration is refusing to verify immigration records so that Florida can ensure the integrity of their votes. And this has been going on for some time, and we've got that whole issue again. It's a double system here, and they're saying we want the immigration records. We want to verify that the people who are voting are actually legal to cast a vote.
Yeah, it's common sense, and most people would support it if you put it to them and say, do you think only U.S. citizens ought to be able to vote? But they've weakened election integrity so many ways. But it goes beyond that. It goes to congressional districts. The Democrats defeated a bill that would require the U.S. Census to count only U.S. citizens because the census stats are what they use to create congressional districts. So if you take a district that's full of illegal aliens and you say, well, everybody has to be counted, then you're giving more votes to places where they are flouting the law with illegal aliens.
Yeah.
So that dilutes the votes of actual U.S. citizens. And I think Democrats voted unanimously against that. And that's the point of my upcoming column, that the Democrats really ought to be labeled as enablers for some of these more bizarre policies. And I don't think the Republicans are doing enough to say that, look, it isn't just the Biden-Harris administration. It's all these Democrats who are supporting all these policies in Congress and even in local offices.
Yeah, we even have I think it's Georgia, where they put a stop to a rule that required election officials to hand count ballots. They had already passed this, and now a judge says, no, you can't hand count them. They're saying it introduces uncertainty into the process?
That's so false. That's one good thing Governor Youngkin has done in Virginia. He's gotten rid of no automatic voting machines because they can be hacked. They had a bunch of geeks appear before a congressional hearing a few years ago, and they showed how easy it is to hack these voting machines, even though we keep being told, well, they're offline, you can't do that. Yeah, you can. So we have counting machines in Virginia, and by the way, I'm in Northern Virginia, but we don't have the voting machines where you pull the lever on the machine. You have to write it yourself on the ballot, and then it gets fed into a counting machine.
We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk here on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, are whales related to any land animals?
Chris, evolutionists think they are. In fact, this is one of their strongest arguments these days, that whales evolved from land animals with legs. Some say that the ancestor looked like a cow or maybe a wolf or a hippopotamus. Well, I think they're all wrong. Recently, the head portion of a whale fossil was found in California. It didn't have the rear portion at all, but this didn't keep evolutionists from claiming that they had small rear legs. Chris, why do we believe them? Why do even evolutionists believe them when they make up stories like this? The Bible says that God created whales on day 5 of creation week. They've always been whales, and they still are whales. Even whales go back to Genesis.
If you would like to learn more about science from a Christian perspective, please visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America, Election Integrity at Risk. Our topic today with Robert Knight. Bob writes a column every single week. And Bob, I understand your columns, and you've got one just coming out on election integrity. These are available without cost to our listeners?
Yeah, it's free. I send the column out every Monday morning to a list of my own, an email list. And if you just send me your email address, just say sign me up, I'll just add you to the list. There's no cost, and you can always unsubscribe if you don't like them.
Mm-hmm. And, friends, his next column, I understand that will be coming out Monday next week, is dealing with election integrity?
Yes, it is, and a larger issue about just how radical the policies are that we're being asked to accept and what we should do about it.
Friends, the email address, you can send an email to Robert Knight, the number 4, Robert Knight, and Knight is spelled with a K. Robert Knight, number 4, at gmail.com. Robert Knight 4 at gmail.com. And Bob, if they just put in the subject line, sign me up, you'll know what it's all about?
Yeah, they can put anything they want, but most of them just do sign me up. And that's some of them write a little note if they like what I've been saying on the program, that sort of thing. But they don't have to. It's real easy.
So again, friends, you just send an email to Robert Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, the number 4 at gmail.com. And just say, heard you on Crosstalk, sign me up, would like to get your email. And the next one, his next column coming out on this topic of election integrity. There are so many drop boxes, Bob, has been a big controversy as well, and whether those are secure or not. I saw the mayor of Wausau, Wisconsin, as he was going by the drop box that they put out there, said, hey, this thing is not bolted down. He went and got a two-wheeler and hauled it into his office. He was out in a public area, and he removed it physically because he said, this is not secure.
Oh, good for him. I like it when people take action. They see something wrong, they go out and try to fix it.
Yeah.
That reminds me, like Governor DeSantis in Florida, where he had ordered the removal of debris from Hurricane Helene because Milton was coming, and he was afraid it would be flying everywhere and smash buildings.
Yeah.
And one of the local landfills refused to open their gates, so he went in and just unpadlocked them, and I don't know whether they broke the lock or rammed it or what. He opened it. He said, look, lives are at risk. We're going to open this.
Wow. But Dropboxes, your thoughts on those, Bob? Because some of these are just placed in random areas around communities.
Oh, yeah. When I've gone into Washington, D.C. to attend a Nationals baseball game, you see drop boxes all over the place. Nobody's watching them. Anybody could do anything they want with them. What worries me more is mail-in balloting, because then you have the U.S. Post Office involved, and they're not always as efficient as we'd like. And also, the way they're doing it and mailing ballots to households that are registered, but not requesting the ballots. I mean, that's been new since 2020 because of the COVID pandemic, and a lot of these awful policies came out of COVID. They were a gift to the Democrats, who have been trying to loosen election integrity for some time. But the idea that you send a whole bunch of ballots out to addresses where people may not live anymore, may not be valid at all, because the voter registration lists haven't been cleaned up. And then you go to court to prevent governors from cleaning up the voter list.
Yeah.
What does that add up to?
Yeah, fraud is there. And, Bob, we know that Pennsylvania is a very hotly contested state, and the mail-in ballot process there is really, needs to be brought under the microscope. I mean, all kinds of inconsistent standards are being, introduced. Yes, we're going to allow ballots to be cured, et cetera, but this is a key state, and it really puts into question the integrity of that mail-in ballot.
Yeah, there was one good thing that happened, though. On September 13th, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania ruled against counting inaccurately dated mail-in ballots. The Democrats had wanted to count any and all ballots, whether they were filled out accurately or not. So that was a good ruling. And, in Wisconsin, they start processing and counting absentee ballots on Election Day.
Right.
And the state has to certify the results by the first day of September. That gives them a lot of time, actually. That worries a lot of people, that this election may just drag on and on. Do you remember the Gore-Bush election?
That would be actually
for weeks.
I think it's the first day of December, not September, because September is before the election.
I said December.
Oh, okay.
Unless I misspoke. Anyway, it is the first day of December.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about Laura Bush?
No, I just said, do you remember the Gore-Bush election where we didn't know for days, weeks even,
right,
until the Supreme Court said, look, the count has been miscounted in Florida, and then they recounted and found out Bush had won, and that swung the election. But the thing we should remember about that is a whole media consortium studied the election. They sent in an investigative team because they suspected Bush had stolen the election. And they concluded, and we're talking Washington Post, Miami Herald, these are liberal papers, they concluded that the count was accurate and Bush had won the election in Florida, and thus the national election.
Robert Knight is with us today. Again, friends, his columns are available to you. They can come to your email box. All you need to do is send him an email, robertknight, 4, @gmail.com. And in the subject line, you can just say, subscribe me or sign me up, and he'll do that free of charge. He has written some books as well, like Liberty on the Brink and Crooked, What Really Happened in the 2020 Election, How to Stop the Fraud. And those are available through his website, which is roberthknight.com. roberthknight.com will take you to his website, but robertknight4 @gmail.com will get you to his writings. Let's hit a couple other issues, because we see some of these matters. So we got the mail-in matters going on. Sadly we still can't get it right. I mean, the Federalist just wrote about a Minnesota county sending out ballots, mislabeling a Republican candidate as a Democrat and Democrat candidate as a Republican, and you've got these kind of ballots that are drawn up that we need to go back to school to proofreading school. Those kinds of issues are going on, but there's another kind of fraud, Bob, that I don't think we normally consider as fraud, but it is and it involves the media. I mean, some are really pointing out at this recent 60 Minutes interview with Vice President Harris that we understand was conducted with some very selective editing to put answers in place that just were not there, or manipulating answers to make her sound more palatable to the audience.
Oh, yeah, and that was the subject of my column this week, the 60 Minutes interview, how they took great liberties with the editing. She rambled, and they made her sound really clear and decisive. And they also took stuff out about her talking about Israel and its enemies, which disturbed a lot of people because CBS seems to be leaning against Israel at this point. And in fact, one of the CBS executives put out a memo saying that do not mention that Jerusalem is in Israel.
Right.
Do not say that. Really? Why not? Of course it's in Israel, because they don't want to upset Muslims, and I think they're worried about the vote in Michigan, in Dearborn, and in Minnesota, where there's sizable Muslim communities. But CBS has done many other things, and they had a morning show with the anchor Tony Doku-Pill, and he was interviewing Ta-Nehisi Coates, who wrote kind of an anti-Israel book, and he asked him some good questions. So he was disciplined for that. And people are realizing, wait a minute, CBS is off track here. You're showing your bias. And the good news is Sherry Redstone, she's the chair of Paramount Global, which owns CBS, has told CBS, you really need to have some more conservatives featured because there's so much liberal bias on the station or the network.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that happens.
So we have the media manipulation that's taking place. Another aspect, too, I'd like you to address, Bob, and this is Governor Tim Walz, the running mate to Kamala Harris, has made his desire known to abolish the Electoral College. And after he made those remarks, the Harris campaign, started backpedaling, and then he came out and said, well, that's not the official position of the campaign. But his heart of hearts, he wants to do away with the Electoral College system. Our founding fathers had good reason to put that in.
Well, they did. And here's a quick illustration. Think about it. If this interstate compact gets through, where states have agreed to give all their electoral votes to whoever wins the national popular vote, and a lot of states have signed up for it, that would make all the states not on the two coasts kind of irrelevant. Think of this. In 2016, Hillary Clinton beat President Trump by 4 million votes in California alone. And in New York, a couple million votes. So what eliminating the Electoral College would do would be to allow states where which are run by Democrats, where election integrity is not the most highly cherished notion, and where they could run up the vote. And then if all the states just agree, well, we're done, popular vote determines it, and we don't have to worry about the Electoral College anymore, now we've got mob rule, basically.
Yeah. And right now, under the Electoral College system, every state is in play. Yeah,
the candidates really have to visit all the states to appeal to the voters. It was a brilliant innovation by the Founding Fathers so that some heavily populated urban areas, even way back at the founding, wouldn't dominate the whole political scene.
Oregon considering ranked choice voting. Is that a concern?
Yeah, ranked choice voting is a scam. It really is dishonest. Maine has it now, and I was born in Maine, and I consider myself a Mainer in Virginia. And the whole premise is you have to vote for several people, not just the candidate you like, and then they tabulate whoever comes up as second or third, and they keep knocking people out, and you may end up with somebody winning the election who didn't win a majority of the vote. That's how they took out a Republican congressman in Maine, Bruce Poliquin, a few years ago. He won 49% of the vote. It was a plurality. So they just kept counting again and again until the Democrat won, because the Democrat was the second and third choice of some people. This is confusing. It forces people to vote for people they don't like, which sounds totalitarian to me.
Yeah.
And why do we want more confusion introduced into the election system?
Elon Musk, he's been not too quiet this election, has he?
Oh, my goodness. And he's paying a price for it. Did you know that as many as 6 federal agencies are now investigating Musk? Everything from the FAA, going after SpaceX, to the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, even the Securities and Exchange Commission about his purchase of Twitter, and even the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is going after him. And this all started after he started backing President Trump.
Yeah, nothing.
Kind of curious, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Friends, we're up against a quick break. Robert Knight is with us. I've got a few more questions I'm going to be running by him. Be ready to formulate your questions. In a short time, we'll be opening up some phone lines to take your brief comments or questions regarding this matter of election integrity. But friends, it's not all doom and gloom. Certainly the importance of getting out and casting your vote is absolutely critical. As Bob wrote in a recent column, he said, vote as if your liberty depends on it, because it does. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
There is a movement to propel humanity toward an advanced level of existence. Those seeking to change the culture of society are on a rapid trajectory, aggressively touting the extremely powerful capabilities of AI,
artificial intelligence, and transhumanism.
The ultimate goal of the elite is to obtain immortality and become gods. In the book, Artificial Intelligence, Transhumanism, and the De-Evolution of Democracy, pastor and Bible prophecy speaker Dr. Richard Schmitz unfolds his extensive research and documents revealing information unveiling the agenda of those pursuing this technology for evil. You'll also see how these technological advancements fit hand in glove with biblical prophecy and one known as Antichrist. The book, Artificial Intelligence, available for a donation of $18. Call 1-800-729-9829.
Robert Knight is with us today, and folks, he's been writing for many, many years. Former Los Angeles Times news editor, writing for the columns for the Washington Times, numerous publications that carry them. You can have them right to your inbox by dropping him an email, Robert Knight 4, and Knight is spelled with a K, Robert Knight 4 at gmail.com. And just say, sign me up. As I heard you on Crosstalk today, would like to get your columns, and he'll be glad to send those out to you. And again, his books, his resources, like his book Crooked, What Really Happened in the 2020 Elections, How to Stop the Fraud, A Liberty on the Brink, and other topics you'll find on his website, roberthknight.com. That's roberthknight.com. Bob, as we're talking about this whole matter of integrity, it sounds like lots of doom and gloom, and we don't want to leave people there, because certainly there is a call for us to exercise the stewardship we have of our vote and to cast that vote. And there are those who are really seeking to make a difference. And my, oh my, look what's happening right now with the Kansas City Chiefs kicker, Harrison Butker. I mean, he has formed his own upright pack on voting values and getting people engaged and so forth. He's taken a lot of heat for it, but certainly letting his voice be heard.
Yeah, and the refreshing thing here is that the team is backing him. The top executives at the Kansas City Chiefs are saying, hey, he's entitled to his views. We're not going to take any action. They've been told they ought to kick him off the team. And you know how tolerant liberals really are. You disagree with them, they want to crush you somehow. But they've backed him. And that's even with Taylor Swift up there in the booth watching her guy, Travis Kelce, out in the field catching passes. Mm-hmm. And she's actually endorsed Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that'll have as much impact as they hope it will. In fact, I think you're seeing more and more of a groundswell of people who are fed up with the radical policies at all levels. Mm-hmm. And I like what President Trump said, make it too big to rig. In other words, if there's just an overwhelming number of votes, they're not going to be able to cheat. And more people are watching this time around. Some of the things that happened in the pandemic election of 2020 won't be allowed to happen this time. Hans von Spakovsky, a friend of mine who's at Heritage Foundation, he runs the Election Integrity Project, says it'll be a much more secure election than it was in 2020. And that the best thing people should do is probably early voting in person. Mm-hmm. He doesn't trust the post office. Yeah. And he doesn't knock the post office. He just said, look, if you want to make sure your vote counts, I would go in person, because you never know what's going to happen on Election Day. Well, most of us... Yeah, let me just... of us prefer voting on Election Day. It's an American tradition. But what if something happens on Election Day? You can't get to the polls.
Look what just happened in Oklahoma, Bob. I mean, we had somebody who was going to commit an act of terrorism on Election Day in order to disturb the process. And, some people think that may be a lone wolf. I can't attest to that. But what you said, what if something does happen on Election Day? Will people be discouraged? I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go to my polling place, to cast my vote, or stormy weather, whatever it may be. Early voting has begun in a number of states, and going there in person, there are huge numbers. And as a matter of fact, next Tuesday or Wednesday is it when early voting begins in our state? And guess who's coming? Mm-hmm. Barack Obama is coming, with Tim Walz coming to the liberalist city, Madison, Wisconsin, and they're going to charge people up and get down right now on early vote, and that is something that many need to observe, the importance of being sure your vote is included.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was reading in the Epoch Times yesterday that already 5 million people in the country have voted in the early voting states. It's moving fast. And I think that I'm going to try to talk my wife into early voting. She likes Election Day voting, but I'm going to tell her these things, and I think she'll go along with our going down to the elections office and voting early. Yeah. I think it's a good thing to do.
And knowing that process is underway, Bob, I too have been an advocate of voting on Election Day. It's just something that you do, and yet you recognize the shenanigans that are taking place in different realms around the country, or places running out of ballots. How many times have we heard that, running out of ballots, or any number of things that going in and making sure that vote is cast is critically important. Friends, before we go a little bit further, let me open our phone lines to take your questions or brief comments for Robert Knight. Our phone number here, 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. And Bob, some hear our discussion today said, I'm just tired of the whole process, and I'm just sitting this one out. I received an email we did the other day from someone who said, I'm not voting this election because there's lying on both sides of both parties. They're lying, and I'm tired of it. I'm not voting. I saw this quote from Thomas Jefferson in his retirement papers. He said this, we wrote this: "We in America do not have government by the majority. We have government by the majority who participate," and how critical it is for each individual to participate in this election.
Yeah, I've heard people say, I'm tired of voting for the lesser of two evils. And my answer to that is, hey, that's always the case, because nobody's perfect. If Jesus was on the ballot, then the choice would be clear. But we're always going to decide between the lesser of two evils. People are flawed, and you have to look at what they're going to do and what policies are going to be put forth, what kind of judges they'll appoint. I mean, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton appointed a lot of Looney Tune judges, and we're still living with it. And Trump made great judicial appointments. I mean, you take that into account. And as far as the policies, both parties are guilty of exaggeration and all kinds of things, but one party opened the border up and has allowed 10 million illegal aliens to flood into the country over the last 3.5 years. It's not, they're both guilty of this. And I've got to say, Kamala Harris, in her interview with Bret Baier and Fox last night, tried to make it seem as if it's the Republicans' fault. It's Trump's fault that the border's wide open, because they came up with this bogus so-called bipartisan bill that would have reformed the border. It was a terrible bill. It would allow over 1 million people to come in illegally before they do anything. It removed all sorts of safeguards. It was a terrible bill, and even the one Republican sponsor abandoned it when he realized it was just a Democratic ploy to say that, look, it's the Republicans' fault, the border's a mess. She did it in the debate. Waltz did it in his debate with J.D. Vance. It shouldn't wash. It was merely a cosmetic attempt to blame Trump and the Republicans.
Robert Knight with us here today. Lines are packed, and let's go right to the calls here. Anthony in West, Bedford, Maryland, or Missouri? Maryland.
New Jersey.
Missouri.
New Jersey. Go ahead, Anthony.
I just wanted to say, I appreciate you guys always coming on and keeping us informed. And I think it's important to remember, yes, it's our job to do our responsibilities, to do our tasks. But we also have to remember that this isn't the is-all, be-all of our existence. Christ is still in control. Whatever happens has to happen for his future coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't deny God's sovereignty in all of this, Anthony. I do know that God uses people, and certainly even as destruction was promised to Nineveh, because the people were evil and did not repent. Yet God sent Jonah there, and Jonah rebelled. I'm not going to participate in this. God got his attention for him to participate, and what happened? The people repented and they turned, and God spared that city of Nineveh at that time. So I totally affirm God is sovereign, and yet part of that sovereignty is that God uses people like you and I to be salt and light.
Amen.
Thank you, Anthony.
Of course.
We've got Aaron in Grafton, Wisconsin. You're on the air.
Hi, good afternoon. I just had a quick comment when you were talking about reasons to motivate people to vote early is also volunteers that have to make all these phone calls to potential voters. It helps make their time more efficient and not have to call people that, should be voting. They've already voted. So that's another reason.
Okay. Thank you for the call.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah, the parties do have access to. They don't show you how people vote, but they can tell you whether people voted or not. Yeah.
Okay, let's go next to Hollywood, Maryland, and Laura is calling. Hi, Laura. You're on the air.
Hi, thank you. I really appreciate hearing today's episode of the early voting. I knew about it, but I didn't know about it. So I will go out and early vote here in Maryland on the 31st. And then also I did call in earlier about a question that was supposed to be voted in Maryland, just to let your other people who may be listening in Maryland.
Okay.
Vote. It's called question 1. You have to vote no on it because it's talking about reproductive rights, but it's really not. It's about going and taking children who have gender confusion away from their families.
Yeah, and thank you for raising that. There's a whole lot of other ballot issues, and thank you, Laura, for bringing that up about Maryland. But there's so many things, whether it be legalization of marijuana or physician-assisted suicide, euthanasia. 10 states, Bob, are voting on abortion-related issues. She's bringing up and transgender-related issues. There is so much that is part of these ballots across the nation that we just cannot ignore.
And, the Republicans have finally figured out that the transgender issue is huge because of the women's sports, girls' locker rooms. People don't like that. Even Democrats don't like that. They don't want their daughters being forced to live with boys in the girls' room or locker rooms. And certainly it's ruining women's sports. Mm-hmm. More and more men are going into women's sports and winning. It wasn't just Leah Thomas, the swimmer, who kind of got the most publicity. It's happening all over the place, and people don't like it. And I've noticed some very effective ads tying Kamala Harris to taxpayer-funded sex change operations for illegal aliens and for prisoners, inmates. This is true. She can't deny it. She's been for it. It's as radical as you can think of, and they really need to be made to own these policies. And my advice to the Republican Party is make all Democrats own this. They're enabling it. If they deny it, okay. Now you've got somebody on record denying it, and that's a good thing.
Friends, we're just less than a minute from our next break, so I don't want to interrupt our next caller here. So we will take some more calls here in our next segment. Our number is 800-733-9829. But, Bob, I saw also from the Daily Signal coming out, Fred Lucas, who is a chief news correspondent, manager of the investigative report project for the Daily Signal. He's also author of The Myth of Voter Suppression, The Left's Assault on Clean Elections, and mentions that at a time when numerous battleground states have been tied in the presidential race, an election watchdog group notes that already this year, 2024, there have been 29 elections that have ended in a tie, including one of the races for Congress. But a number of contests taking place, 47 tied. We understand since I don't know when that one started, but a lot of tie votes, and it's critical that we not be, negligent in casting our vote here in this election.
Yeah, don't believe your vote doesn't count. It could make the difference.
Yeah.
And
also, 18 contests so far in 2024, he writes, decided by one single vote. Lots of ties, 18 by one single vote. Yeah, that's municipalities and counties and states and so forth, but much at stake in this election. We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewtube.com. China is now surrounding Taiwan. They're bringing out their military and their Coast Guard and their various divisions surrounding Taiwan. Is this an exercise? Or this could possibly be leading up to a quarantine, blocking off Taiwan from imports and exports. What will that mean for America? We have vital processing plants there for chips. We buy chips from them that are vital to our critical infrastructure, our power grid, our water utilities, our military, automotive production, on and on we could go. This is a big deal. And yet, what will the Biden administration do? Could this be what leads up to World War III? This is what Xi Jinping wants, according to Gordon Chang and many others. Keep your eye on Israel and, of course, on China. I'm Brandon House.
You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network. Robert Knight is our guest today and talking about election integrity at risk. And matter of fact, friends, if you'd like to get his columns, just send him an email. Send it to Robert Knight, that's with a K, Robert Knight, the number 4, at gmail.com, and just say, sign me up. Bob, just before we go back to the calls here, a further word you had about Elon Musk and his encouragement regarding the election.
Yeah, he put out a fascinating X post the other day. It said that, look, everybody's got to vote because think about all the illegal aliens who have come in the country. And he said a lot of them are being shipped into battleground states. And he said if even 1 out of 20 of them manages to vote illegally, that could swing an election. So people have to get out and vote. It has to be too big to rig. And Musk himself has said he expects to, if Kamala wins the election, he expects to go to jail. He thinks it'll be that vindictive an administration. And there's a lot of evidence that that might be the case. I hope not. And I just want to put it out there. Musk is risking a lot by backing President Trump.
John is calling from Utica, Minnesota. John, you're on the air.
Yeah, I don't know if this is pertinent to what you're talking about, but I read something this morning on a ditty on the internet about the DOD changing some of their rulings as far as aiding police and local law enforcement in squashing civil disobedience or whatever. And I'm just wondering what the thought is of your guest, if they're going to try to use that now in trying to repel some of these people from the voting places.
That's an interesting. Yeah, I've seen discussion begun about whether one side or the other is going to have an insurrection. If Trump wins, is the left going to go rioting in the streets? And if Kamala Harris wins, are the right-wing militias going to do something awful? I think there might be some of that, but not a lot. Certainly, if the Democrats win, nothing ever happens. They boarded up Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and other cities until Biden was declared the winner, and then everybody went away. But they were afraid Trump would win, and he didn't. So it's kind of one-sided. But I don't know of anything legitimate as far as the DOD really getting involved in this.
John, thanks for the call. Tony is next. Neilsville, Wisconsin. You're on the air, Tony.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. And somebody new besides Molly answered the phone.
Tony, right to your question or comment.
I want you to know I signed up for Robert Knight's email.
Yeah.
And I haven't.
Oh, thank you.
I haven't missed an election since 1984, and even if I have to crawl on broken glass, I'm going to City Hall because it certainly isn't stopping the Kamala supporters. None of them are crying about not going and voting.
Thank you, Tony. Letitia in Phoenix, Arizona, you're on the air.
I just wanted to ask a question. I have a mail-in ballot at my house. So I normally go and drop that off at the polls. But I guess my question is it better for me to actually go and vote at the polls rather than drop off that mail-in ballot? Because I've heard sometimes they're not even counted.
Yeah, I would say so. In fact, Hans von Spakovsky recommends that, and he's the top election expert I know. He says it's much safer to just go in person and vote, early voting or on election day.
Okay.
Thanks for the call.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Kathy in Idaho, you're on the air.
Oh, yes, just a couple comments, actually, listening to the conversation on ranked choice voting. That is going to be on the ballot here in Idaho, and the Republican Party is working extremely hard to encourage a no vote. A lot of out-of-state money coming in to push that. They're telling people that it is for open primaries, which it is not, and just a lot of misinformation on the part of the pro-Prop 1 people. And then, in addition, our governor signed an executive order earlier, I think it was this summer, to mandate that only citizens are allowed to vote in our elections, in our state elections.
Yeah.
And then that will be also on the ballot as a constitutional amendment. So that's what's happening in Idaho.
Wonderful. Thank you for that report, Kathy. And the critical issues. Wisconsin also voting on a constitutional amendment that would only allow citizens to vote in elections. I'm going to squeeze one last caller in. Becky in Arizona, you're on the air.
Hi. I have two questions. My husband and I went to the primary election at a church, and we entered our information, our name information in the computer, and then we just did the election booth thing, and then we had to put the ballot in an envelope and in a box, a big drop box inside.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if that was right.
Was that part of early voting?
Yes.
Yeah, that is normally the process for early voting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
One more question. Also, I do have an early ballot that we mail in, but the gentleman said that maybe it's good to go in and do it. So I was wondering if I do that, will it be considered a late early where the vote will be counted after the election day?
That really varies from state to state, doesn't it, Bob, how they do that?
Oh, very much so. They've got all sorts of different deadlines in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and the important thing is you get the vote in.
Yeah.
And if you mail it, you don't know if it's going to arrive or not. If you go in, you know you're doing it.
Yeah, or hand delivering that ballot is a way that you can do it too, Becky.
Yep, that works too.
Okay, great.
Thanks for the call. And I believe earlier we had a warning from the postal system just even about, we can't necessarily guarantee they're doing their best and working to get all the ballots delivered, but in person is always best. Robert Knight with us today. Again, if you'd like to sign up for his column on a weekly basis, send an email to Robert Knight, 4 @gmail.com, and to just say sign me up. His website, and you can find his books, materials, other things there, roberthknight.com. Bob, as always, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, it's always great to be on with you, Jim. God bless you.
And you as well. And friends, don't neglect praying for this election. How critical prayer is for our nation and for election integrity and all that to be handled appropriately, decently, and in order. God bless you, friends. Thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.